U of H's time at Lucas Oil Stadium has come to an end. As you saw here on KHOU 11, University of Houston losing to Baylor in the national semifinals 78-59. So the season is over for the Cougs. Time for Full Court Fever with Daniel Gotera. I'm Jason Bristol. Daniel, instant reaction from you after this game.
You know, I know the players were upset. You saw Quentin Grimes after the game. He was crying. He was emotional. Some of the other guys, Dejan Giroux, those guys that have had a tremendous impact on this program. I know they're upset right now, but you got to put things into perspective about what this team did. They were going up today against a very, very good Baylor team, like very strong Baylor team at every position with height, length on the perimeter, good guard play. For U of H to win this game, they had to have a lot of things go their way, right? They had to play their defensive brand of basketball. They had to get offensive rebounds the way they've won so far throughout the tournament. So my instant reaction is, look, yeah, it's a tough loss right now to feel it for them, but there's nothing to be feel bad about, that's for sure. I mean, they had a tremendous season, a great run. Baylor's just really, really good. They've been one of the two best teams in the country all year long.
And really, that's what I was thinking, that Baylor in many ways is like U of H. They're just better and deeper. And I think we saw that today. Looking at some of the comments here on Facebook, Erica says Baylor had strong defense and did well offensively. Yes and yes. Alex says, go Baylor Bears. Even though my Cougs lost, I hope the team from Texas wins it all. Michelle, way to go Bears. Liz says, sick 'em. And then Colleen says, the Cougs make Houston proud. And can't really read here what Nora says. That'll populate here. But,
yeah.
When you're looking at this U of H team, I think they really had to play not a near perfect game, but as close as perfect as possible because of the way Baylor plays and how deep Baylor is. You looked at some of the season averages where U of H was ranked among the national rankings in defensive statistics and offensive rebounds. I thought, wow, U of H really needs to be near those averages for them to have a chance. And they dug themselves in that horrible hole in the first half by not hitting shots, except one guy named Marcus Sasser. Other than that, I mean, that was just crazy, the fact that they couldn't hit anything other than one guy.
Yeah, at one point, I was talking to our director, Dion, about this. I mean, if you took out Marcus Sasser from the offensive production for the Cougars, U of H would have been down 33-2. I mean, they were down 33-17, and he had 15 of those points on 5 3-pointers. They just had nothing going offensively. And and that's one thing we've seen from this U of H team this season, right? Especially in the tournament. Like, they hit these lulls in their offense. They don't have the offensive flow. I mean, Quentin Grimes didn't have things going. He got a little bit better in the second half, but by that point, they were already down 25 points. And I think it was Clark Kellogg that said it best. This was the Baylor team that we had seen midway through the year, when they were really firing on all cylinders. They were really good. Towards the end of the season, they didn't shoot the ball especially well from beyond the three-point line, but, I mean, today they were outstanding. Even the rotations were crisp. The ball movement was good. Even when U of H thought that they can have, they cut on the angles, they would make that extra pass. And they were just hitting their shots from the outside. I mean, I'll read you some of the statistics. U of H shot 38% from the field. That's about on average what they've done so far through the tournament. Baylor shot 52% from the field, and they were even better in the first half. They were at 58% in the first half. From three-point range, they were at 45%. And the rebounds, I mean, U of H had to win the rebounding battle. Baylor got them there too. But I think you're right. I think Baylor and U of H are similar teams, but I think just Baylor has just better athletes out there on the floor, and they may have been in the system a little long. They know the system a little bit better. But I mean, you look at their post players. I mean, those are big dudes down there, and that's something that U of H has not seen this year, especially in the conference that they play in. And Baylor's just too strong.
And everything is magnified in the tournament.
Right.
And really, when you look at U of H and the way they played at times, Charles Barkley kind of said it. I don't want to say said it best, but he said the reason in his mind that U of H is a good offensive rebounding team is because they don't hit a lot of shots, which, yes, I guess you could say that. But rebounding is always about effort. So for all the Baylor fans out there, tell us which team you'd rather face or rather see in the national championship game. Would you rather have that that Gonzaga team that is certainly the number one team in the country? Would you rather see UCLA? Obviously, for the chance to win, I imagine you'd want to see UCLA. But for the beauty of the game, which one would you rather see? And then for the U of H fans, what was your favorite moment for this season? So we'll take some of these here on Facebook and let us know what you guys think out there in Facebook land. Daniel, what was your lasting memory of this U of H team? Like, what was the thing that's going to stick with you the most?
I think this was the group that broke through and finally, I don't know if justified is the right word, but really stamped what Kelvin Sampson has done with that program. I think that's my lasting impression. Look, I know they didn't have the tournament last year, but in each of the last 3 tournaments that they've played in, they've gone further and further and further, right? So they're setting the bar even higher and higher. They're getting good recruits. The recruiting classes are getting better. We don't know what the future holds. I'm guessing Quentin Grimes is probably going to the NBA. Dejan Giroux's not going to be there either. Justin Gorham's not going to be there either. Those guys, even a huge impact on the program. But I think my lasting impression on this season is that, you know, if you have enough grit and you have enough heart and determination and you have an amazing coach, you can get far, especially in college basketball, because, you know, as we watched the tournament so many years, you just got to get hot. You have to get the right matchups. And people are saying that U of H got lucky because they faced 4 double-digit seeds on the way to the Final Four. But some of those teams are still pretty good. I mean, Syracuse had a nice run. Rutgers was pretty good in the Big Ten, too. I think my lasting impression of this U of H team is that this is now the bar, right? Now they've set a bar. Kelvin Sampson, he says he loves coaching at U of H. This is one of his favorite jobs he's ever had. This is now what they have to shoot for. They have to get better. They know what they have to do to match up against teams like this. And again, it is about matchups. They ran into a team that was really strong today. But I think lasting impressions are, it's going to be a lot of fun over there off of Cullen for a lot of years to come, as long as Kelvin Sampson is on campus. And you got to assume that Kellen may take over after that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And this is the bar, Final Four or bust. And that's the thing about the Final Four, right? When you get there, you want to win a national championship. Obviously, you want to win the whole thing. But getting to the Final Four, and that's kind of the oddity in college basketball, if you get to the Final Four, that means you've won 4 games in a really hotly contested tournament already. You've won somewhat of a championship already. You're one of the 4 best teams to still be playing. So it's nothing to sneeze at. It's something that they can shoot for from here on out. It's a high bar, yes, but I think that's something that they embrace.
Shelton on Facebook says the Cougs will be back. Julie is obviously a Baylor fan, says sick 'em Bears. Fritz, really proud of the Cougs. They will be back. What else we got here? Houston had a great season, so much of the same that we're talking about. Lasting impression of U of H this season. I like the grit. I love that word grit. The defense just really stands out. But for me, I think it's going to be those last second plays by Tremont Mark, maybe. Dejan Giroux,
yes,
the shot against Memphis, the shot against Rutgers. I think I'm going to say defense. I think it's going to be that U of H defense and just the way they just caused so many problems for other teams. But again, the weapons that Baylor had, it was just way too much today.
Yeah, and that's something, U of H now building from this point forward, they're going to be getting some even better recruits from this point forward, right? I mean, you have to assume that now they're even more in the national spotlight than they were before. But they did not have the luxury this year of having offensive lulls, right? I mean, if you're going to go and win a championship, you have to be on point from the very beginning. It's just that their defense was so good that it got them to this point. So the better players that they get in the system, the more offensive talent that they get, the more luxury or the better that they will be, obviously, but they won't have to be as elite defensively. And I think you're right. This particular group, we're going to remember that defense, the way they played on the perimeter, the way that, a guy like Dejan Giroux, shut down Buddy Boeheim. I mean, after all the talk heading into that Sweet 16 match, it was like, oh man, this guy's going to light up the Cougars. No, Dejan shut him down. And, the fact that he was hurt, then he battled back in that Rutgers game, like all that sort of stuff. Those type of performances kind of help teams create like a lasting impression, a lore amongst the fan base. These guys are never going to be forgotten for sure.
It's very interesting, though, you mentioned the recruiting. I'm always in tune to what Kelvin's talking about when it comes to recruiting, and he will say, not all kids, and you know this, not all kids are made for our program.
Yeah.
And I always find it interesting that he says, yeah, there's some great players out there that we just don't recruit them because we don't think they're going to fit our ethos, our culture. And it should be interesting now to see if that changes. I don't think that's going to change, because when you're a coach in Kelvin Sampson's position, where you have all that experience and now you have all this success, I think that he'll still be able to basically pick and choose the players that he thinks are going to fit the program best. And I don't imagine that they're going to be the one and done type recruits, because it doesn't really seem like it fits the culture. Now, listen, if Carmelo Anthony or
Zion, they're not going to turn down those guys.
Yeah, you don't turn down those guys.
The culture,
But
exactly.
but you know, there's usually about 3 or 4 difference makers in a recruiting class, and then I would say players 5 to 105 are probably very close to each other.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, but think about this. I mean, we talk about recruiting classes. You know, a guy like Caleb Mills was here early on in the season, and he left. He transferred for personal reasons, so they had a prolific scorer there. Nate Hinton decided to go to the NBA a lot earlier than he probably should have. He should have been on this team. So, I mean, he was a prolific scorer too. So they've had guys in that system that can shoot, but they just, towards the end of the season, they just could not get that offensive rhythm going. And we talked about this throughout the tournament. It was my key in several games that Marcus Sasser had to show up. He did, but I did not expect that his teammates would be just so off offensively, especially in that first half. I just couldn't believe it. They run those shooting drills, those rebounding drills in practice. They put a lid on the basket. Whack. It seemed like there was a lid on the basket during the game too. I mean, I felt so bad for them. They were trying everything they could, but you got to give credit to Baylor, man. That defense in that first half for Baylor was outstanding, and they showed why. They're now 27-2, 28-2 on the season. So it's pretty impressive.
All right, for everybody watching on Facebook, thanks so much. We are taking your favorite memory or lasting impression of this Houston basketball team, and then for all the Baylor fans out there, which opponent would you like to see in that national championship game? Yes, I know the easy answer would be UCLA, but listen, the competitors out there, they'll say to beat the best, to be the best, you've got to beat the best. So I would love to see that Gonzaga team. Going back to what Daniel said about Caleb Mills, Nate Hinton, I also think that of those guys leaving the program, I also think that kind of goes back to the program itself and the way Kelvin Sampson, Alvin Brooks, the way they really develop players. Because, listen, those guys, certainly they're strong recruits, but they're not those 5-star guys that everybody talks about. And, you know, there's really no difference between a 3-star player and a 4-star player.
Yeah.
And U of H does a great job, it seems, of kind of bringing these guys into the program and then having them become the best version of themselves. And that's really a credit to coaching. That's what coaching's all about.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Gorham is another guy. I mean, that's a transfer. He was named most outstanding, or most improved player, I should say, in the conference this year. I mean, that's a guy, when we talk about culture, we talk about fit, that Kelvin is looking for to add to the pieces that he's already recruited. Quentin Grimes, a transfer from Kansas, he was a totally different player at Kansas. It didn't work out for him. He was kind of lost, and then he came here with the right coaching, better mindset, and look what kind of player he's become. He's going to probably be in the NBA draft. So yeah, I think it goes a lot to coaching. That goes to schemes. We saw in the Syracuse game a guy like Kelvin Sampson, who's experienced in breaking down different defenses and the 2-3 zone that Syracuse runs. I mean, they work that zone pretty good, right? So it goes to coaching, goes to player development. But I do want to say, I know we got a lot of Baylor fans in the chat too. Scott Drew and what he's done at Baylor is a remarkable achievement, because that program was a disaster. A disaster. We don't need to rehash what happened there. Everybody kind of knows what happened there. I mean, they could have just folded up the program because it was just so in such bad disrepair. And then Scott Drew shows up on campus, and they've just like a steady progress, man, just getting better and better and better. I know the people have been dogging them a couple of years that they haven't been getting it done in the tournament. They've had some talent, they just haven't gotten it done in the tournament. But boy, they've just broken through. But I think it's worth recognizing what Scott Drew and that Baylor coaching staff has done there. Alvin Brooks III on that coaching staff too, but he's done an amazing job in Waco, and that should be commended, especially given where the program was in such dire straits there when that all went down.
And I think that also goes along with give coaches time.
Yeah.
This day and age, it's always like, after 2 or 3 years, you haven't won anything. Let's get rid of you. And I think that certainly that was a very unique situation, unlike many that we've ever seen in college basketball. But the fact that he's been there that long and now has done this, I totally agree with you. Now, Joe here on Facebook says UH had no 5-star players recruits that's needed in the Final Four. I don't know if that's 100. I don't know if I would go along with you, Joe, 100% on that. I don't know if I would go along with you on that.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, obviously, it'd be nice to have a guy like a Carmelo Anthony or Zion Williams. Those guys. But look, even Zion didn't even make it to the Final Four, right? He didn't even get there.
Yeah. I was just thinking of number 1 overall players to put it in context. But yeah. No,
that's what I'm saying.
Sure.
You don't need those. I mean, especially in college basketball now, there are guys that leave. Some of these really high level recruits, they get to campus, they already have their eyes set on the NBA already. Cade Cunningham, right, from Oklahoma State, he's gone. I mean, he had a great year. He could probably use another year at Oklahoma State to develop a little bit more, but he's going to the NBA. So in college basketball, I don't know. I think it's better to have guys. Yes, it helps to have those amazing talents offensively, defense, whatever. But I think it's good to have guys within the program that know what it's all about. They've gone through the wars, as they say, right? They've gone through all the battles. The experience really helps. And you've seen, look at a team like Gonzaga. I mean, you don't see a lot of guys from Gonzaga leave early to go to the NBA. Every now and then they will after a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. But, I mean, that is an experienced group. They're undefeated. We're seeing now with Baylor. I mean, I don't know how many 4 or 5-star recruits they had, how they came out of high school and all that. But all I know is while they've been on campus, they've gotten better as a group. And I think that makes a huge difference in college basketball. It's not so much of an individually driven sport as it may be in the NBA, per se.
I agree. I agree. A lot of times we agree, Daniel. Most of the time we agree.
Most of the time.
I would.
Someone that didn't agree with you, though, I have to mention it because our Jason Bristol did get some love from the CBS crew. His tweet showed up. During the halftime show, and Charles Barkley. I don't even know what he said didn't even really make sense.
Yeah, I don't really quite understand the response. I said
go ahead and tell him what your tweet
Cougars
was.
are sadly down so many that Charles Barkley may accidentally call them Rockets during this halftime show.
And that would have been a fair comparison, given what we've seen from our NBA franchise in this town.
But all right, so let's wrap up with this.
I thought that was funny. I thought that was funny.
Thank you. And it wasn't a slam.
I know.
It wasn't a slam on U of H at all. I mean, I said sadly. It was just kind of the state of affairs with the Rockets. And I think Charles during the tournament had accidentally called U of H the Rockets, or vice versa. I can't remember.
He did say that U of H was better than the Rockets.
I think that's what.
He did say.
Anyhow,
which is probably also true. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but certainly Matt Musil has been covering the Final Four for us in Indy. We'll have reports from him coming up tonight after the late game, Gonzaga and UCLA. Let's wrap up.
I actually want to say one thing. We talked about it before. And we know Jim Nance. I've talked to him before. I know, Jason, have you ever talked to Jim before?
I have not.
Okay. Well, he's great. I know Matt has a great relationship with Jim. He's a diehard Cougar. He went to U of H. I don't know, and he's a professional, right?
Yep.
I don't know if I could have called that game today, if I was in his position. Now, granted, I don't have to worry about that because my basketball team in college is never going to get to the Final Four. I can 5-star lock that.
You'd be happy if they won a Big Ten championship.
That's correct. We're never going to do that either. But all I'm saying is I think it was a great job by Jim, and shout out to him. I do want to mention him because it's tough, man. When you're seeing your alma mater, especially if you're so passionate about your alma mater, just get trounced in the first half like that. That must be hard, man. So I shout out to Jim Nance because it was cool listening to him and that dynamic, I think.
And it's funny you brought that up because where it really struck me was perhaps maybe Jim getting emotional or where it might really hit him was when in the arena they're blasting his voice during the introductions. Like when they were doing the introductions and you could hear Jim Nantz, that's when I thought, well, geez, I wonder what he's thinking right now.
Yeah.
I wonder how the emotions that he has. But in hindsight, he was probably in game mode and it didn't really affect him that much. But
and he's been down this road a couple of times.
That's true.
He knows what he's doing,
Yeah,
but I just
yeah.
think it was so cool for him. I'm glad he got the call of his team in the Final Four because I know how much it meant to him to come back to campus a couple of years ago. I think it was a Cincinnati game or Memphis game.
Yep.
It was on CBS. It was a noon tip-off. And I know he had a really fun time doing that, so I can only imagine what it was like to call a Final Four game.
all right, so I assume that you're going Gonzaga in this second game.
I am, yes. I'm going to go with Gonzaga, and I think it's only fitting, right? Those are
Yeah.
the two best teams that we've had in the country so far. Earlier this year, they were supposed to play against each other, and their game got canceled because of COVID reasons. Gonzaga is loaded. I didn't see them a lot during the season, timing and issues and all that, but just watching them in the tournament, they are so good. They are very strong. But then watching that Baylor, if Baylor plays the way they played today, that is going to be a tremendous matchup, and that's kind of what I'm rooting for too.
Yeah, that's what I'm going for. But I'm kind of struggling with who would win that Baylor game, Baylor or Gonzaga, because certainly Gonzaga now has the weight of those expectations of an undefeated season. But again, you brought up the experience of those guys.
Yep.
And it doesn't seem like they've been fazed by it at all. So at this point, I don't know who I would go with in a you know what? I want to see how Gonzaga looks in this next game here on CBS.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's only fair to decide who's going to pick. But yeah, that's going to be a barn burner for sure.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on Facebook. For Daniel, I'm Jason as we take a live look at Lucas Oil Stadium for Gonzaga and UCLA coming up next on KHOU 11, and of course, much more coverage tonight on KHOU 11 News at 10.